Hello everybody and welcome to my series of micro lessons. These short lessons will focus on common errors that are often made when writing literature essays and will give you advice and guidance on how to fix them. Today's lesson is on ensuring your quotation is relevant to your point. So what is the problem here? So the problem is that your quotation doesn't support or prove your point, and it seems like your quotation is random when paired with your point. So your teacher may not understand why you've chosen it, or they may not really understand how it supports your point, your argument, what you're trying to prove. So what is the solution? Make sure that you choose the best quotation. So you should have a range that you are considering and evaluate which one best supports your point. Test a few out. You could also highlight your own keyword in your point to help you. So you'll notice that I've highlighted a few keywords here in both the error example and the correct version, because this just gives you some focus and it helps you to really look at what it is that you're trying to prove, and then that helps you to decide which is the best quotation. So let's have a look at some of the errors. So our first one, Bradbury engages the reader by showing that the house is alive even though there are no people. So our key words here are house is alive. That's what we're trying to prove. That's what our quotation should demonstrate. Bradbury describes how the dog is covered with sores. Now, the quotation accurately shows something about the dog, but the quotation does not accurately show something about the house being alive. So it appears disjointed and the quotation appears random at this stage. So let's have a look at how we can fix it. Bradbury engages the reader by showing that the house is alive even though there are no people. The appliances are described using personification as the stove gave a hissing sigh. So notice how now we are not focusing on the dog, we are focusing on something that's inside the house, something that is a part of the house. We're now refocused on the appliances, which is much more relevant. Now to prove this second part of the point, so yes, we have something that relates to the house, but we need something to show it's alive. So we've got this link to personification. So we're now aware that we're going to show how something inanimate is alive or has features that we associate with human beings. And so the quotation does accurately show that gave a hissing sigh. So as a sigh is something that only people can do, we do get this sense now that the house is alive. Let's have a look at a poetry example. In the poem War Photographer, Duffy uses a metaphor to show how all life is transient. She begins the poem by describing the photographer in his darkroom who is finally alone. Now, whilst the quotation is nicely introduced and embedded, it doesn't really support the point. So the quotation is just about the photographer, doesn't really show anything about all life being transient. So let's have a look what the correct quotation would be. In the last line in stanza 2, Duffy reveals that all flesh is grass. So now this is much clearer, and you can then go on to talk about what this metaphor shows and what it represents in terms of life and its transience. And our final example here is from Romeo and Juliet. In Act 3, Scene 3, the friar foreshadows Romeo's fate and tells him, "Here from Verona art thou banished." Now, Romeo is to be banished, and that is a part of his fate. However, it's not really the best quotation to demonstrate Romeo's inevitable fate. So let's have a look at what would have been a better choice. In Act 3, Scene 3, the friar foreshadows Romeo's fate when he notes that Romeo is wedded to calamity. So this idea here, this metaphor really does demonstrate the inescapable fate of both Romeo and Juliet, and there's much more that you can say, much more that you can analyse in terms of how it shows their fate and what it means. So a much better choice. So I hope you now understand in a little bit more detail how to check for yourself whether your quotation accurately matches your point and whether it supports what it is you are trying to prove. My final top tips for you are to underline or highlight the keyword in your point. This really centres you and helps you to really look at what it is that you're trying to focus on and what you're trying to prove. Once you've got this keyword or key phrase, just double check that your quotation accurately displays this idea or point. If not, maybe go back to the drawing board, see what else you can find. could also try and make a list of words that describe the quotation. So just jot down some adjectives that you would use to describe the quotation, what's being described in terms of maybe a character or an action. If these words are similar to the words that you've used in your point, then you know that it's relevant. Also ask yourself, how does this prove my point? If you are struggling to find an answer, then you should probably choose a different quotation. So I hope you've enjoyed my micro lesson on how to ensure that your quotation is relevant to your point. Thank you very much. Goodbye.